So, welcome to How to Rock Astrology. I'm Dustin Cormier. Today we're going to be talking, in this aspect of the video, we are going to be talking about Uranus and Taurus through all 12 signs. Particularly to right now, we are looking up Uranus and Taurus in the sign, Uranus and Taurus for an Aries rising. Aries Lagna. Aries Ascendant. All the same things. Now, I'm a Vedic guy, and I really try to ground the sense of how Vedic astrology is really the vessel, the truest vessel for how to describe the 7 classical planets of astrology. But Vedic astrology does not have Western astrology, and I'm combining the two of them. This is going to be my way of describing how we would talk about Uranus and Taurus for the individual rising signs. Let's get into it a little bit, shall we? Once I find where we're at here. Doop and doop dap and doo doo doo. Let's leave that there. Sorry if this is a little bright for your screen, but now, so these little, we're not going to talk about necessarily this little thing on the side, but basically these slides come from my astrology apprenticeship with Ryan Kurczak, the Asheville Vedic Astrology apprenticeship program. It's made to show the natural flow of Aries Lagna as relates to its friends. So the A means an auspicious house, lorded by a lord that is auspicious to the ascendant. The I's mean an inauspicious lord, ruled by a planet that is antagonistic in its agenda towards the goals and the nature of the ascendant sign. Now, Uranus and Taurus is an interesting one. Let me just say, before we get into this, I should say that if you read the earlier part of this episode, we talk about how any description of Uranus is really intrinsically tied to the sun. And particularly deeply, in the case of Uranus and Taurus, we're talking about the 10th house from Leo, because Uranus is the 10th house from Leo. Taurus is the 10th house from Leo, rather. So that's why we can see here, Taurus in the 10th house from the 5th. Because Leo is the 5th house for an Aries rising. 1st house, 2nd house, 3rd house, 4th house, 5th house. Taurus is in the 10th from the 5th. Now, why this is important for everybody is because Uranus relates to an infinite metaphysical energy network of soul evolution. And the sun is kind of right now the best that you can express, the best that your psyche and your ego has allowed you to manifest and unfold the pure potential of your sun in your spirit. The sun has a pure spiritual potential, and Uranus is kind of like the deepest father. The Native Americans said that the sun was actually a hole in the sky, and Uranus was inside that hole. That's sort of, I get that from Isabel Hickey's interpretation of that Native American wisdom. So Uranus relates deeply, and wherever Uranus is, it's trying to get us in tune with our ego's capacity to confidently express what the sun represents in our chart, always and very deeply. Particularly here, Uranus in Taurus is going to relate very much to as the 10th house from Leo. In this case being the 10th house from the 5th house for Aries. Okay, so this might seem confusing, but let's talk a little bit about this. The sun is very important to Aries Lagna, because as we can see, this is from Brihat Parashara Horashastra. The sun is auspicious, as is Jupiter, and, well, Mars is its own funky thing, but we could see that the 9th house from Aries is Sagittarius. So all the trinal houses are always auspicious because they relate to the agenda of the ascendant. Leo relates deeply as the 5th lord of Aries, okay? So Aries is the 1st house, Leo is the 5th, and Taurus is in the 2nd house. Now, what does it mean that Taurus, what does it mean that Uranus is in the 10th from the 5th? I hope, this might seem like a lot, but I'm going to kind of unfurl it for a little bit. If you guys just allow me to get a bit of this code out, I'm going to unfurl what this means for all of you Aries rising people. Now, Taurus is the 10th from the 5th. That means we have to ask, what does your intelligent self-discernment and creative expression, Leo, your intelligent creative expression as relates to what you are, your spirit. Your spirit's been trying to express your whole life as an Aries what you are. And you live through very deeply as an Aries through that 5th house of Leo. Aries always is just like a double relationship of the sign with the house. Leo is the 5th house and the 5th sign for an Aries. So what is your intelligent creative expression of through yourself? What does this creative expression use and to establish activity in the world? Well, remember the 10th house is our worldly activity. It's established worldly actions that we use. And you can read the 10th from any sign. The 4th is the 10th from the 7th. The 3rd is the 10th from the 6th. We could read this about how the 10th from any sign shows a stage through which the karma of the house in question can be played out. So for an Aries, Taurus provides a stage through which their creative self-expression can be played out. This is an important thing because every sign with Uranus and Taurus is dealing with this dynamic. Aries just doubles it up because Aries, the house is always the same as the sign. So this means that Aries is fiery Leo, the sun for you as an Aries rising, wherever it is. That sun needs the familiar puberty and hormonal structure that you developed on when you were going through puberty, when you were young. Whatever develops there, you need to use the swagger, the swing, the confidence of that period in order to make it easier on you, in order to develop a platform through which you can engender a sense of the best expression of your spirit, that 5th house. Okay? The sun here grounds self-expression because Leo is ruling the 5th house. Taurus in the 10th from the 5th means that resources and possessions are what brings Aries creativity onto the world stage, where they can really develop on it, on their creativity and their expression in view of the world. Once Aries understands its long-running values, it may consider its self-expression in ways that are enriched by their deeper emotional and identity desires. So there's deep fulfillment available for this person. We can see that self-expression of the spirited sort, of Leo. We're talking for an Aries. You as an Aries, we know that Aries is ruled by the head and it just bumps and it jumps into whatever identities it feels like being. In fact, Uranus has been transiting before Uranus came to Taurus. Uranus was transiting Aries, which is your first house. You might feel that Uranus so far has been drawing you to explore your identity. When Uranus was in Aries, you were pushed to experience your identity at a very deep level. And you wanted to reach for the, not just expression, but identity. You wanted to find an identity throughout all that time. And it might have been pushing you to develop on some kind of active action. Some kind of real, like just a desire to realize something. Just volition for its own sake. These are all first house things. Wherever Mars is in your chart is going to define how well that went. And hopefully you've found, throughout all that time, you've found an impulse to express something and to embody something. And that something could be anything. As long as it's got a form through which you can say, this is my thing in the world that I can express myself through. Or that I can be, really. That's the Aries thing. But of course, when you have Uranus in Aries, it's in trine to Leo. So it relates to self-expression. Embodiment, identity relates to expression, because Aries and Leo are first and fifth relationship naturally. So you might have been building this sense that I have to be something. I have to push myself into something. Now Uranus has come into Taurus. And now all of a sudden, Uranus is in a place where you've come to the world stage now, okay? Aries was the 9th house from Leo. So your self-expression was just pushing itself just underneath the world stage while Uranus was in Aries. Now that Uranus is in Taurus, there is a stage through which you can find the embodiment that you've been seeking. But that embodiment, whether you like it or not, is going to relate to some kind of form. And Uranus is going to give you a sense that no form is going to perfectly satisfy this Aries desire to embody something. No form, because that's what Uranus is. It's formless, non-binary, dissolving, ecstatic intuition of what lies beyond this present experience. So now that Uranus is in Taurus, you might be you've been pushing to embody something with Uranus and Aries, and you might not have found that it was easy because you don't have anything to ground that desire. You might not feel like you have an identity, a form that can effectively, abundantly draw attraction to you, which would ultimately be the platform for your spirit, for the Leo. So now, you as an Aries with Uranus and Taurus, you're in a period where you are needing to experience forms as relates to people close to you. The people around you are all there. That's the 10th house from your Leo, because Leo wants to express something, and how it expresses it is its immediate relationships. Taurus is the 10th house from Leo. In order to really ground your spiritual expression of what you want to be, the formless self that you really are, which is just pure energy and potential, you need to express that through a form which you can dance and play with and experiment with. And this form, in this case relating to Taurus, is going to relate to how you've always identified sexually and in your self-worth and in your values. What do you have? What value do you have that relates to what you've always been, through which you can show this performance, this sun, the performance of whatever your sun is in your chart? That thing is seeking to develop on a constant state of creative expression. And that creative expression is going to deeply relate to how others see you in the world as a person who draws abundance to themselves, just as a sexual person, as a gender, or as an enjoyable person. That's really what it's more all about. Now, if you have a good Venus, if your Venus is well placed, then you might have an easier, when Uranus comes into Taurus, you'll find great ways to develop on the sexual chemistry that you've already found, while also finding the compensation that you need. For example, if you're an Aries, you're probably like a leader type of personality who shoots first, asks questions later, and is always trying to develop on your own creative capacity. So you're probably someone who is a leader and says, I live to express the potentials that I feel in myself, and I need somebody to support that. I need people to support that. Cancer being like the 12th from Leo, Aries is really looking always to have an underbelly of an emotional reality of people that will support the Aries, and they don't always find it because they're more of this fiery, discerning, leadership, intuition vibe. Now, with Uranus and Taurus, you might find that the way that you've been relating people, if you have a good Venus, this period is going to still shake you up. But if you're a man, you might find that this period is, if you're a man or a woman, this period is causing you to think in a non-binary way of, how am I as a leader, as a person who does express creative potential in an initiating way? Where am I not listening to people? And where can I confidently develop on my ability to be this leader, but also develop a trust with my partners that they can support my leadership? Do you have that in your life? Do you have a partner who trusts at a deep emotional level that you're so worthwhile that any decision that you make, they are going to support, or not necessarily support, but have a feeling of genuine support? They might challenge you on it and ask and analyze it with you, but are they ultimately going to say to you that, I know that you are the cheese, you are the self-directed person that can get us where we need to be in this relationship and in the world? If you're a man in particular, these themes all ring true, and you need to learn how you can do that, but also develop on the opposite feminine aspect in yourself, the receptive aspect of yourself. If you're a woman, you need to be able to do this leadership, but when Uranus comes into Taurus, you need to be able to do this leadership thing while also finding how your appetites as a woman, how your appetites as a supportive person can be brought to their best. Uranus and Taurus is teaching you this as an Aries. But whether you're a woman or a man, if you're a man, this leadership will in Uranus and Taurus, through sexual relations with others, will open up the energy field for you to do this kind of leadership in bigger places, in bigger roles, as a boss, as you're a maker of your own career. And in fact, this might even give you a capacity to develop your own career when Uranus is in Taurus. And for a woman, Uranus in Taurus is going to enrich your capacity to still be a leader, but also is going to show you when your leadership is detrimental to your relationship, if and when that is possible. Now, if you are a non-binary gender, or if you are a bisexual person or a homosexual person who's relating with the same gender, the same rules apply to whatever you are. You need to find a way to relate to the non-binary, formless genderlessness, which seeks to an appropriate place to be male, to be female in this situation or that. This is going to be the second house of you that's going to enrich and give you a form through which you can confidently express your creative capacity. It's the platform that you need to express your highest potential, your highest creative potential. This is the field through which you're going to develop this capacity, the skill of your discerning intelligence. When you can say, I need to be a leader here and I need to follow here. Uranus and Taurus is teaching you this through your intimate sexual relationships and your personal psychology. So some personal psychology, self-help books, tantra, these are all things that can help you to develop on who you were since puberty, whether that personality or thing that you've been since puberty is really what you want to be. And your relationships now might be challenged by the new intimations of how you can best relate in a relationship. But whatever that knowledge is being brought up, it will always give you a better grasp on how you can express the 5th house of Leo, the 5th house of your spirit. And so this is an important, you being an Aries, Uranus is in the 10th from your 5th house, which is very important for expressing your 5th house. Your 5th house is part of the triangle of what you are. So this is an important transit for you. Consider whether, if you are Venus Atmakaraka, then all of these themes will relate deeply. Uranus and Taurus is going to teach you something now that is going to be useful to you for the rest of your incarnations. So really give this one some heed, really, because it can bring you depths of soul realization that are hard and challenging, but could give you more abundance for this incarnation and incarnations to come. Very important. Almost the same thing if Venus is presently your Mahadasha. If you're in the Mahadasha of Venus, this period is teaching you something, again, very deeply about the same thing, about how you relate in intimate quarters with people, whether you bring abundance to them, a sexual fascination for them, or just by flicking your wrist, whether others easily integrate themselves into your confident spirit. This period can teach you about that through these things. And that's about that for Aries. Aries is always kind of fun to talk about because of the nature of this fact that Aries' sign and house are the same thing. Aries the first house, Taurus is the second house. It's always fun to talk about Aries. Greetings, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to How to Rock Astrology. We've been talking today about what it's like when you have Uranus and Taurus. What it's like for us all to have Uranus and Taurus. That's kind of what we've been dealing through. And we've been going through the individual rising signs. Now, today, we are going to talk about what it's like when you are a Taurus rising yourself and you have this phenomenon of Uranus being in your first house. Obviously, this is a big important one for you. Now, feel free to check out the early parts of this video to get a little glimpse of what this might mean for you as a Taurus, having Uranus here. Having Uranus in the transit, the first house, is really quite an expansive thing in itself. But we are going to relate it to what we've talked about in terms of what Uranus means to Taurus throughout this whole series. So, welcome. My Taurus rising friend. Well, let's think a little bit about it, shall we? First thing I should do is get into my pictures. So each rising sign, of course, is going to take to this phenomenon a little bit differently. You are Taurus, Uranus, well, this should actually say Taurus is the first house. I seem to have put second house, meaning the second sign. So, Taurus is the first house, and Leo is in the 4th house from Taurus. Now we are going to talk a little bit about why, first of all, what does the sun have to do with Taurus rising here? Well, the sun has a lot to do with Uranus. We've been talking in this whole series about how Uranus, call it Uranus if you want to. Uranus is what I like to call, it's an infinite metaphysical, it's a metaphysical evolutionary framework for spiritual evolution, as well as biological. The idea is that Uranus contains the nature of information. The way I've been kind of describing it is that, like, if cavemen, one caveman is smashing a rock against another rock in order to break bones. Let's say there's bones on this big rock, and he's taking another rock, he's going bang, bang, and every time he does that, some sparks fly off. And the other caveman might look at that and go, for some reason, there's something in this mammal brain that is picking up the transmission of some intuitive reality that these sparks might be able to, if we hit them on some dry grass, maybe they'll do something. Oh my gosh, look at that fire. It's probably how fire was created. It's this intuitive, instinctive reaction to a reality that's being apprehended, the present reality. Now, everybody's sun represents the current energy field, the present you, that has karma, that has potentials, that is your spirit, your Atma, and it is looking to express itself through the sun, through the karma that you have. And everyone's sun, everyone's karma is building towards the evolutionary implication of that Promethean fire within. The best way to use the karma that you are. And Uranus represents this in the same way that the raw materials of these apes making something that's greater than the sum of the parts, that being fire, using the raw materials of rock to create fire, which has this combustion. In the same way, Uranus represents that fire. Whatever it is that you need to do to put yourself in a state of combustion and high Kundalini vibe so that you're expending more energy, but also transmuting more energy into the great stuff of spiritual realization and karma reduction by what you are. By using yourself and your chart and your karma to its best advantage, you can find some judo trick so that you levitate, you enlighten, and you make the world lighter just by unfolding your beingness. That's what Uranus is trying to relate to the sun in particular. And it relates particularly to the sun. I've been talking through these videos. There's a Native American mythos that defines the sun. I get this from Isabel Hickey. She had this idea. The natives, actually, Native Americans, have this idea in some certain sect of theirs that the sun is actually a hole in the sky. And Uranus is the true sun that lies beyond that. It's a very psychedelic sort of thing going on here. This goes to show that the sun is just the hole in the sky. It's the hole in your karma. It's your genetic continuum reaching through what it has done energetically and the potentials of what has been done. That's the sun. But it's not pure potentiality. It has the pure potentiality of Uranus in it, but this sun can express what has been expressed thus far. Uranus is the intuitive sense of how to best spin the present genetic data in order to use it in a constructive way for the evolution of the spirit. So Uranus is very important, and also the sun is always important in order to understand what Uranus is doing for us in transit. So that's why whenever we do these videos, we consider what Leo means to the ascendant. Now that's why, as we look here, we can see that, so this is a little diagram given to us by Ryan Kurczak. Ryan Kurczak is my esteemed astrology teacher. I've been in the Asheville Vedic Astrology apprenticeship program for a little while now. I'm on my 3rd year, and so this is where we get this diagram from. And in this, we're essentially talking about how all the other signs and their lords, their planetary lords, relates to each ascendant. This is for Taurus Ascendant. We notice that Jupiter, Venus, and the Moon are evil. Ironically, even Venus is evil. This, Taurus is kind of funky in a funny sort of way here. 1st, 2nd, 3rd, 4th, 5th, 6th. Because, it says that Venus is evil for a Taurus, but it's not the right thing to say. It's more like Venus is going to bring on agitating realities that are a necessary evil in order for Taurus to express its best self. So even though Venus is considered evil by Brihat Parashara Horashastra, we notice Ryan still gives it an auspicious mark. The green A's mean that these signs are auspicious to the ascendant. The red I means that it's inauspicious, meaning it's a tough house for Taurus to deal with. And the N means neutral, essentially, which is interesting in this context because the sun is basically what we're going to be talking about today. The reason for this duality here is because you notice generally that air and earth lords planets group together and fire and water planets group together. For example, you'll notice that all of the earth and air signs are ruled by either Venus, Mercury, or Saturn. Taurus is Venus, Virgo is Mercury, Capricorn is Saturn. Gemini is Mercury, Libra is Venus, Aquarius is Saturn. Okay, so earth and air are derived from those 3. And Moon, Sun, Mars, Jupiter are all about fire and water signs. And there's a divide here. It's just so all it means is that the sun can be kind of antagonistic to Taurus. Here it's considered neutral because it's an angular lord, and generally the sun is never, in the same way that, the first lord can't be antagonistic to the nature of the first house. Taurus is Venus, so even though Venus rules the 1st house and the malefic 6th house, the evil 6th house, Venus will bring agitating 6th house qualities to whatever it is, but it needs to because that's what gives the self the nutrients and the life path that it needs to express and survive and stand. And the sun is the same way. So it's interesting that there's a 2-way for Taurus rising. This might be a tight time in the life of Taurus rising to have Uranus and Taurus in a certain way. The sun is considered neutral because the sun and Venus don't necessarily get along per se. It's a 4th house and it's an angular house. But no matter what, just like for Pisces, a Taurus needs to learn to use the sun. And that's why it's going to bring a bit of antagonism and frustration, but it's important. So you as a Taurus need to learn to use what your sun is. Now, I've been saying in all these, we want to talk about how Uranus and Taurus can reflect on the sun for a Taurus rising. Because the sun is the inspiration. It is the grid work through which you can work out the karmas in your life and gain energy in these things. So, this is why we beg the question. What I want you to notice is that Taurus is the 1st house. Leo is the 4th house from Taurus. 1st, 2nd, 3rd, 4th. And so therefore, Taurus is in the 10th from the 4th house for Taurus. Because Leo is the 4th house. Now, what does this mean? This might be a confusing language, but what you have to understand is that the 10th from any house is the field, is the platform through which the karmas of that house is worked out. You could say this about anything. The 10th from the 7th house is the 4th house. That's because the emotional foundation, the 4th house, is the platform through which the karmas of the 7th house relating to others is worked out. We can't work out our karmas of dealing with others without dealing with our own emotional foundations. So, what we can take from all this is that Taurus is the 10th from the 4th house for a Taurus rising. Now, what does this tell us about the sun for a Taurus rising? Okay, let's ask. What does your inspired... we're going to ask, the 10th, the 4th house uses something to establish its activity in the world. Leo, for you, a Taurus. It needs to use something to establish its activity as the creative spirit. The sun is this creative spirit. It's the sense of the self to take everything in the chart and nobly hit at what is the best expression of yourself. Well, you as a Taurus, well, anybody, for every Leo, we need to use Taurus as the field through which we can work out the karmas of what Leo represents. In this case, the 4th house. So, you as a Taurus have Leo in the 4th, and you have an inspired goal to project yourself as a cornerstone, your abilities, your activities, everything you do is kind of a cornerstone for your own emotional enjoyment. You, in fact, you really project yourself as one who brings in a strong emotional foundation for yourself as well as for other people around you. It's because Leo is in your 4th house. So you go about 4th house things in a Leo way, and you go about Leo in a 4th house way, right? This is kind of a mutual thing. The sun here grounds a sense of enduring, adapting self-expression through intimate relations. This is what Taurus is really doing with the sun, is that it's looking to ground itself. Taurus is seeking to, by its expression, by its projections with others, sharing itself with others, it lives to embody the fullest, its fullest expression leads to gluing people to it, gluing familiar relations to it, people that the Taurus loves, and also, just performance. Performance is what gives Taurus emotional foundation and clarity. So this goal of Taurus, having the sun, Leo, expressing through the 4th house, this is enriched when you work out your 1st house. So let's just digest what this means for a moment. Through what Taurus is. So Taurus's very nature expresses this emotional foundation. Taurus is a kind of a funky emotional foundational house in itself. This is one sign of all of them that needs to use its 4th house to project itself. So we're going to read a little bit, just a little glimpse at what it means to have Taurus, to be a Taurus and to have Leo on the 2nd house. Blah. What it means to be a Taurus and to have Leo, the sign of Leo, in the 4th house. Okay. This little excerpt comes from Astrology, A Cosmic Science by Isabel M. Hickey. She defines, if you have a Taurus Ascendant, she goes through all of the signs as relates to Taurus Ascendant. Okay? So you have Leo on the 4th house. It's going to relate a lot to your solar expression and to what it means to have, again, Uranus and Taurus. To Taurus, home is the castle, and there they want to rule. They want attention to be focused on their home, for the home and the possessions are the center of their being. It's how they project themselves. All the other things they do, having Capricorn in the 9th house, the work that they do, which they feel fulfilled by, this is all coming through the nature, the self-expression of the sun in the 4th house. The whole 4th house is kind of the driven desire to project a solid sense of a foundation in one's life, to grow the empire in the materialistic sort of way that Taurus does. Kind of makes sense that the natural 2nd house relating to self-worth, self-value, and possessions and resources would have Leo on the 4th house, where it seeks to project and perform through all that it attracts and all that it feels solidly close to. The Taurus wants a settled place, which is his center, and where he or she can dispense hospitality in lavish style. They love a good pantry, a good table, and nice service. Owning the home is very important to them. They expand at home. They lavish love on those close to them, and they feel very badly when that's not possible. So the emotional, we should say that pride can keep the Taurus from admitting a lack of real love in their basic relationships. Taurus maintains the outer semblance as much as they can. Leo here also gives the Taurus a strong inner faith. The key thing being there really deeply is that pride really can cause them to lack, from admitting lack of real love in their basic relationships. It's the pride, is because they almost want to project, okay. I'm starting to see it now. So Taurus itself wants to be attractive. That's how Taurus Ascendant expresses itself. It uses the feeling of attraction, because Taurus relates, is the 2nd house, relates to our sexual relatability, relates to our familiar patterns in puberty through which we would have expressed attraction through others, where we could feel abundant in the presence of others, where others would want to come to us just by our attraction power. Taurus, the age of 7 to 14, when we are developing the traits of what Taurus is, it relates to age 7 to 14, puberty. And Taurus seeks to have abundance. This is what the nature of Venus is, the nature of Taurus is. So it seeks to live through its abundance. And where Venus is shows how we put attention and energy into using this abundance to attract more abundance through love. And if you have a good Venus, then you will diligently work towards having it for yourself, but also doing it for others. It's the nature of Venus to actually establish an attractiveness that everybody can appreciate. Look to the health of your Venus to define whether or not this desire for attractiveness, the desire for ease, the desire for luxury, the desire to be appreciated, comes in an egoic way, where you're driven just like, I need to look attractive. I wish that I looked good to everybody. And, if you don't have a good Venus, then you're just going to look like you're sucking up to an image that you're trying to build of yourself for others. Constantly just trying to force an attractiveness that is not exactly abundant. You can't really force attractiveness. And Uranus and Taurus might be teaching you about because this is your basic self-expression in the 1st house, Taurus being the 1st house. This is your basic self-expression, And Uranus and Taurus is going to show you if you have that for real. If you really do express that, or if you're just kind of vain for the sake of vanity. You can be a little bit vain as a Taurus, it's okay. But as long as that vanity is really fulfilling you, and you can work towards using it as a conscious attraction power that helps everybody feel good. Because not only is it good for you to feel good, to be attractive, but it's also, being attractive and being around people who admire you, you're helping them too, because you're being they have admiration for somebody who's worthy of being with them. And the health of the sun, the state of the sun, is basically the vehicle through which you affirm and project and say, these are the people who I want to express this closeness to, this attraction, and to get this admiration from. And of course, that's going to require you to understand in yourself which is beautiful, but also relate to others and understand what it is in others and in trends that can make you attractive to anybody. But if in this period of Uranus and Taurus, you might feel like you need to play with and expand on the theme of your sexual relatability. If you're a man, then you need to know when you can be stubborn for the sake of a proper stubbornness. I mean, stubborn's not even the right word. The right word here is kind of like noble. When you're living for your own lived inspiration in the sexual experience, in a personal thing, because what happens for you in your own sexual, personal, private life and reality, this gets brought out into the world outside of you through whatever you do. However you choose to take that energy and express it out into the world, it's going to reflect when you deal with your bosses, for example. Leo, everyone's sun, needs to be able to deal with authority. And this Taurus wants to develop a security with its boss and with the people close to it and with its co-workers. And it wants to express that it can be an attractive part of any business that it deals with and through. Especially with Saturn, will probably firm this person into a solid position in some kind of company, but they aren't as ambitious as Capricorns. They have an ambition to come up and to be good at something, having Aquarius in the 10th house especially, they want to have humanitarian, they want to be useful to a group outside of themselves, which Taurus is kind of used to doing. They're used to seeing what people like, what trends are useful and good. But this is a Taurus that can be pushy about their emotional foundation. Just because, all Tauruses can be, because of the Leo. The sun is prideful about what it gets as its emotional foundation. The problem is that when you want, if you're proud of the emotional foundation that you have, you might not be as honest about it as you would like to be. This is what Uranus, the intuitive sense of abundance, or the intuitor, being in Taurus in your first house, is trying to show you how you can attract abundance by being more abundance of your life path, more abundance through being what you are. A total letting go of Taurus instincts to put him or herself and others into rigid box relations will allow Taurus to open and expand its ability to be a cornerstone for others intrinsically, not because they've seen a desire to be that for certain people, like an incompatible boss, for example. To actually be an attractive cornerstone through what Taurus is, through what you are not just as a Taurus, but like through everything that you are. You need to learn not to put people in this or that box, because the Leo is fixed about knowing that this is my lover and I relate with you as the person who cooks my dinner for me and makes my sandwich so that I can go to work and feel comfortable. And when I get home, I want my dick to get sucked or my breast to be squeezed, or, you know, just I want to have this kind of affection. You better get it for me at this time because I got a job to do the next morning, and I better feel emotionally good about all of that, or else it's going to ruin everything for everybody. Because you're prideful. The sun is stuck on this emotional foundation. But the emotional foundation should be real. Especially if you want to be truly proud of what you've attracted to yourself, of how people see you at home, of how you come off. If you want to come off as attractive, and if you want to be abundant and to live in the abundance and luxury that is life and to actually have material abundance, then you need to examine whether you are living in your relationships for pride's sake, or whether you are living for an emotional, a sexual abundance and fulfillment that comes from what you are. So that you're not just living with a lover who has been familiar with you all this time throughout your life, because you need an emotional foundation. It's like a Taurus can suck on just about anybody that helps them make life easier. But sometimes Taurus is not just looking for what makes life easier. They're also looking for what makes life abundant, like not easy for its own sake, but juicy, like effective. And what makes you effective in your everyday routine, in your everyday relations with your friends, co-workers, lover, as well as your boss. What makes a Taurus deeply accommodating to all these things is the charm, is the self-faith that when you as a Taurus man or a woman, when a Taurus man says, I think we should get a house down here at this place. I've been thinking about it and I'm moving towards it. This is a decision that I've made. You want to be able to make sure that your partner responds to you. Or even just something as simple as when you're with your partner and if you're a man and you say, I have an idea for something that I can express for us to do. If you have this idea and you willfully throw it out there and your lover says, great, I love this vibe that you've got going on, let's do it. Because if you've attracted a lover who wants to support that, you have to be willing to move and shift now in a way that brings out also your receptive side. So you're not just being a tough man. You have to kind of invoke the non-binary possibilities inside of your sexuality. So you can relate to the woman, your partner, and say, how does this work for you to make you actually happy? You need to be able to do that, but still say, all right, baby, have this wheel and deal. Like, trust me, baby, we're doing this. It's important to have that kind of confidence in your own decision-making. And personal and private and sexual relationships and the energy field that you trade in your private life is what's going to establish your ability to do that in your emotional relationships, but also your business relationships. And if you're a woman, it's the same kind of thing. Your ability to confidently say, sometimes you can be stubborn and, you should be able to trust a lover's assessment of where you guys are going in this moment, in this relationship. You should be able to listen to it and receive it and trust where your partner's decision is coming from and listen to them and actually listen to them. These are the kind of things that Uranus and Taurus is teaching you. How can you still be a leader while being receptive as a woman? And as a man, it's how can I still be receptive while retaining this leading, dominating factor. Now, I've put it out in male and female here like this. That's like the classic Vedic sort of approach, but in the world of Uranus and Taurus, the non-binary, formless gender, the anticipation of that being in everyone's consciousness, Uranus can see the intuitive formlessness as regards to gender. And you need to be able to adopt that while still expressing your gender when it's appropriate to the situation that you're living through. This will help you to gain an abundance by living a life, living your reality in a way that is not unexamined, basically. Your very basic self is coming into question here today. The effectiveness of your life path, of where you choose to build the life that you're living right now. Uranus is probably giving you some deep, shuddering, shaking visions of how you ought to be, who you ought to be, where you ought to orient your life. And right now is a very good time for you to relate it to where you could take yourself. Right now I recommend for everybody, especially for you as a Taurus, look up Tantra. Look up the energy of abundance, this kind of stuff. And research sexuality and get a therapist. Go to a therapist and tell them how you felt in puberty and whether it reflects on an ability of yours to be charming to the people in the world around. Because if you feel gruff and if you feel stiff and you're not being fulfilled in your everyday activities, in your career, and in the people that you attract to yourself, then you're just pulling and hauling all these things because you're prideful. Just because you have the pride to keep this emotional foundation. Not the one that's best for you in your life path, but this one that you've been given. Now, if you are in a relationship with somebody who you do deem is important to you, this period might just tell you that you need to find some way to think about how you can express your basic identity in a way that can be transformed. And possibly, if that's what Uranus and Taurus brings out in you, if the experiences of this period bring you to a realization that you need to transform how you identify yourself, then you need to be able to relate this to your partner through communication. That's really the important ticket for this particular sign going through this experience. When Uranus was in Aries, you might have experienced challenges to your basic sexual relation values. So again, it's the same kind of thing where when Uranus was in Aries, it was in your 12th house. And this relates to the foundation that your identity expression rests on. The 12th house is this kind of like nebulous, vacant sense of emotional wellness, no matter what's going on. Now, you might have been trying to have inner peace while Uranus was in Aries. The whole time it was there. You might have been brought to places where you have some inner contemplation, where you say, why do I not have inner peace? What is it that I can do to bring more inner peace? And it might have brought you to the point where you've looked for different ways of having inner peace. Meditation even possibly, all these kind of good spiritual things, but ultimately you might have just been digesting some hard material related possibly also to your marriage partners, because Mars rules the 12th house and also the 7th house for Taurus. So while Uranus was in Aries, you might have been learning through some kind of isolation. You might have spent time away from your lovers and your partners, or time with them, time with your marriage partners and your specific close relationships with people, and it was intimate, close time. And you might have found that you don't find a sense of emotional peace with however they live, however they react, whatever their aesthetic is, whatever their values are. But you're married to them still, whether it's your marriage partner or business contracts or friends or your job. All of these things might be stuck on you in a way that you do not relate with intrinsically at the level of what you are. And you might have found this while Uranus was in Taurus since about 2011. Now that it's 2020 and Uranus is in Taurus, Uranus might be showing you that the reason that you felt kind of emotionally despondent with all these things, and the fact that you can't bear the annoying ways of those around you and close to you, it's kind of because that's kind of what Taurus does at its best, is that it hangs out with others, helps to absorb their emotional grossness, and sits with them and enjoys, even though like you can throw a lot at a Taurus, and a Taurus will patiently, stoically sit and try to help you figure out what's going on in your life. You as a Taurus, that's a part of your vital life path. And if you can't sit with your friends or with your business partners or whoever and digest the business at hand without telling them how annoying they are, then the businesses and things that you've allowed to crop up, you might have to relate to them through the abundance that you are, through Taurus, your first house. Now that you're in the first house, which is in the second sign of Taurus, you need to define how you can best relate your sexual compatibility with these people, with your ability to lead, and to even ask them, this frustrates me when you do this. Is it okay for me to say that? If it's not, then you've got to just deal with being able to say when people bother you, or to be true to yourself about realities and aesthetic realities in your life that don't fire you up and don't give you the sense that you're bringing out the best of the charming attractor, an earthy, sensual lover of indulgence and luxury and sexuality that you have the capacity to be. It doesn't need to necessarily be even about sexuality. It just needs to be about unconscious psychological charm to those around you. If you've been finding that you don't get an emotional peace by doing these things, then your emotional peace might be just lacking, because it's not about your ability to meditate. It might actually be about the form, the gender, the energy dynamic that you seek to psychologically express with others based on your foundations in childhood. That's why it's an important time right now to look back, to get a therapist for you in particular, because this is your first house. Maybe consider getting a therapist and looking back at your past and seeing how you can fulfill your sexual life and relationship life in a way that this charmingness can be brought out with your lover, and can be brought out in a way that brings the abundance and loving charm that everybody loves about you. And it'll make your whole life way easier. It'll even reduce the grit of the fact that Libra is your sixth lord. So Venus rules the first house and the sixth house. And by doing what you do, you kind of invite antagonism when things don't go perfectly aesthetically well. Right now is a good chance to uncover how you can best take advantage of your sexuality in order to bring about the most abundance and livingness that your Taurus is so known to do. So this is a tricky one to talk about because it's the ascendant itself. Yes. So ultimately, all in all, I hope you guys enjoyed that. I hope that this was something that could give you some useful reflections to digest on. I'm Dustin Cormier, folks, for How to Rock Astrology. Keep an eye out because we're going to be talking about more in Uranus and Taurus for all the signs, and I've also always got stuff going on. So thanks a lot for watching, folks, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Greetings, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome back to How to Rock Astrology. Today's episode, we've been talking this whole series about Uranus and Taurus and what it means for all the signs, the rising signs, that is. Today we're going to think about what Uranus and Taurus means to Gemini rising. So strap in, folks, because this one is, like all of them, this is going to be a juicy one. Uranus and Taurus is significant to Gemini, especially if Venus is your Atmakarka or Venus is in your current Mahadasha, which means that the period of Uranus and Taurus is doubling with that theme to instill important spiritual lessons to you, which will be important and useful for your spirit, your self-worth, now for possibly incarnations to come, particularly if you have that. So check out our Uranus and Taurus video on its own to see if you might possibly relate to any of those figures. It would give extra importance to you. For now, let's talk about what Uranus and Taurus means to all Geminis. Now, we've been talking in this series about what Uranus means to the sun. Uranus particularly means something significant to the sun in all of us as the power generator of the chart. The sun is a combination of karma and unexpressed potentials, which need to express themselves in time through a rhythmic, reliable, channeled schedule and schema. We seek to break through with the sun, but we also seek to balance it deeply with Saturn. So there's a three-way vibe going on with the sun, Saturn, and Uranus. Saturn is like it's like a game of musical chairs. That's how we've described it. Where when everybody dances, and that's the sun. No matter what you do as a Gemini, for your solar ambitions, for what you seek to express as glory in your life, to express gloriously from with what you are, based on your spirit of what you are. Whatever that is, might go through especially for a Gemini, lots of different experiences, feelings, progressions, and you can get bummed out by trying something for a while, and then Saturn comes and says, hey, this is all cute, but now you've got to go through high school, now you got to find possibly a specialization in school, and you got to fit this to a certain form, get yourself into a job, get some kind of thing, some kind of education, some kind of particular expression or channel that can be recognized in the world. That's what Saturn does. And it validates the sun in a deep way. But, if Saturn has a hard time in your chart, then you might not take well to this. If you don't have a good Saturn, then you won't be able to deal with the constriction. You want to just open up in that solar way, the proud way that the sun does. And that's not a great thing for the sun's capacity to develop progressively in the field, a particular field that can make itself useful to the world in a way that can give abundance. The world of abundance relates to Saturn as well as Venus, which is important for Uranus and Taurus, of course, and as well as Mercury. So, what does Uranus mean to the sun in particular? We've been talking about how the sun, in the Native American mythos, according to Isabel Hickey, in the Native American mythos, the sun was considered to actually be a hole in the sky. It's like an open portal for the karmas that the avatar, express for the metaphysical energy continuum that you've been progressing through in all of your incarnations. But those aren't the ultimate expression of an evolutionary paradigm, of your evolved self. Uranus represents intuition of how the best use of something can come through. How we've been using, the metaphor I've been using is, imagine two cavemen. One caveman has bones and is trying to separate the meat from these bones. So he takes a rock and he smacks it against the bones on this other rock. And every time he does that, it's maybe the rock he has is flint, and he accidentally causes a spark. Bang, bang, but he's not noticing the spark, he's just noticing the food. Now the other caveman might see that and think, might not even think it, but it's just like an intuition principle. It's that this caveman looks, rock, stone, fire. Maybe if we do that on some dry brushes, then it might combust and make a combustive element that can increase energy. The ape doesn't know the knowledge, but the caveman could intuit the knowledge, even though they don't understand it scientifically. This is what Uranus is. So for the sake of your soul, you might feel and intuit the best possible evolutionary use of all of your karmas that you've expressed so far, but you have to live through them still. And Uranus is the enlightening principle relating particularly to how to best use your sun. Put your sun to its best advantage. So wherever Uranus is in the chart is speaking precisely to what that house can do for your sun. Okay? Now this is an important one for all of us because Taurus is the natural 10th house from Leo. And the 10th house from anything is the field, the platform through which the karmas of that sign get worked out. So therefore, Taurus is the 10th house of Leo. It means that Taurus is the platform upon which everybody's sun needs to express itself. And this is obvious and important because our Taurus relates to the age of 7 to 14. It relates to puberty. It relates to our self-worth, our self-value, and our intrinsic values, which we could find use in based on our biological body. Taurus is earthy, relates to Venus, relates to sexuality, relates to energy exchange. Now, all of us are an Aries influx of pure energy potential, but this pure energy potential needs to find experience through some kind of pull, some kind of expression that is not infinite potential. And if it needs to find expression that through a form, it's going to be a form that needs to be able to relate to other forms in a dynamic energy exchange that brings mutual abundance and spins so that one gets abundance while the other is recycled and vice versa. Everything in the expression of our spirit, of our sun, of Leo. If we want to express the best potentials of ourself, we might even feel ourselves to be like non-binary or to be something that's beyond gender. But we need to use gender and the nature of our own gender. We need to use our bodily, our sexual relatability from what we have been since we've been developing through puberty in order to easily flick the wrist and use our sexual charm and charisma and the attractiveness of what we are to other people, of what we have to offer, of what we have of value to others who need what we intrinsically have, and to understand that what we are is intrinsically valuable to somebody. Everybody needs this in order to express Leo. Everybody needs Taurus, this sexual relatability at a deeply personal level of intimacy with those close to you, in order to express the highest potentials of the spirit through that particular form that builds there. Now, as I always say, you can check out our Uranus and Taurus video to get a feel for what this means in terms of a non-binary person, because we're not really talking about gender so much as yin and yang, especially for a Gemini, because Geminis can be very flitty, flighty, and loose in the world of form, kind of nebulous, especially because Taurus is in the 12th. So the gender of a Gemini can be rather nebulous. But if your Venus is well placed, you can have this nebulousness. What is said about Gemini is a cool album called Zodiac Cosmic Sounds that has little poems about each sign. And what's said about Gemini is that Gemini, light-hearted awareness, is a warm hand on a cold day and a cool breeze on a warm day. Meaning that Gemini can relate perfectly to the temperament of whoever they're with, especially if the Venus is well placed. Because if the Venus is well placed, then this nebulousness can still come through with forms that are fulfilling and satisfying. Right? Because your Venus in your chart relates to your self-fulfillment, your capacity to receive and understand your own, what makes your deepest inner motives tick, and gives you an enriching emotional fulfillment. So, Venus relates to that, to Gemini, and the 12th house is Taurus, is gender forms, and our ability to be appropriately pushy when we need to, but also receptive and to listen when we need to. And it's this ability that gives that Gemini's third house, the third house of Leo, stands on the 12th house, because again, the 12th is the 10th from the 3rd. So I'm just going to give you guys, let me just finish that up. Since the 12th is the 10th from the 3rd, that means that the 3rd house here for Gemini, that being Leo, needs calm emotional understanding of its own self-worth. It's the 12th house relating to Taurus, and the sense of self-worth and the abundance that it attracts through your experiences of having been enjoyable and charming based on what you are, based on your intrinsic set of values, what you're interested in, the peace that you can kind of find in your most peaceful contemplative moments. All these things, if you find them, if you understand them, and you deeply, truly relate to them, again, especially if you have a good Venus, then these are the things that are going to allow you a platform through which you can experience the 3rd house, the changeability, the expression of communication, the exploration of pathways, of neural pathways, of hobbies, all these things. The Leo in you, in order to have the self-faith to move forward in any of these directions and to ultimately find your expression in the world, you need to have confidence in your self-worth and to know that whatever you do has an emotional volition of fulfillment, of attracting abundance to yourself, even financial and material abundance, which allows you, as a Gemini, to have the contemplation time, the quiet time, in order to develop and discipline yourself towards the cultivating of skills and knowledge and a career or creative ambitions. Particularly also because Taurus rules the 12th house and the 5th house for a Gemini. So that means Venus is going to deeply relate. And this inner peace, this contemplation that you find as a Gemini, if you can know your self-worth and demand in your relationships that you find these times to contemplate, to discover these things that you enjoy in yourself, and even to tell others about it and to enrich others with this understanding of your need to have silent moments to develop your skills on. That's what allows you to develop your skills and to find things that you deeply enjoy as relates to what you are. Otherwise, if you don't have a good Venus, or if you haven't worked out your Taurus in your 12th house, then you might be pulled in so many other directions as a Gemini that you won't be able to instill the best capacities of your spirit as a Leo. Taking the time, having the time, because you have to manage your time well in order to have the recreational ability to take most advantage of your 5th house and your 3rd house, Leo, and your sun, wherever your sun is in your life. Because your sun as a Gemini is the 3rd house. It will probably relate to constant communication, especially a communication in the sense of a group, a collective that can appreciate how witty, how quick, and how useful your knowledge base is, as well as the skills that you've been developing this whole time. The skills you've been developing this whole time relate to intrinsic values that you've discovered through ideal groups. Then you will have lots of knowledge and data on what the groups that you enjoy and the activities that you enjoy, and people will find these useful. And this is what your sun really digs as a Gemini, right? That's in a way your ability to do this communication, to make confident statements as relates to an immediate situation. That's what the sun here uses, that capacity to really move everything else and to further and progress and develop in its inspiration towards feeling like it's living for the purpose of Leo. And it's tough to deal with because it's the 3rd house is a little bit of a tricky thing to deal with for a Gemini rising. Now we can see here, if you're paying attention, can you guys see what I'm looking at? Yes, good. It's Timothy Leary. We can see this Vedic Southern chart. It's a Gemini Ascendant. This whole picture comes from my astrology apprenticeship program, and it's trying to show you that there are good signs and bad signs for every sign. Gemini is given a funny thing because there's all these neutrals here, but essentially the I's are inauspicious and not good houses, and the A's are auspicious and positive houses and signs. Gemini is part of the earth and air grouping, so it tends to get along well with Venus-ruled signs, Taurus and Libra, and Saturn-ruled signs, Capricorn and Aquarius. Although here it's interesting that they're neutral because the 9th Lord Aquarius is also the 8th Lord, and the 8th Lord is unstable. This is how these planetary configurations work, you know, at least in the Vedic sense. So we can see that Leo is kind of incompatible with the nature of Gemini in a lot of ways because Gemini doesn't want to be egotistical about its sharing of information. But the ego, the desire, the stimulation of this impulse in the Gemini causes it to come through with like a bit of a heavy wittiness, a bit of a heavy pointed antagonism that can happen. Now, what reduces this antagonism is in a strong way. What we say is that the 10th house from any house, again, is the platform through which that house works out its karmas. And this is the 10th from any house. The example I always like to say is that the 10th house from the 7th house is the 4th house. It's because when we work on our emotional foundations close to us and close to home, we can work out the karmas of how we express ourselves through through others. By working on our personal and individual private relationships with those close to us, we learn how to better deal with business relationships without getting taken advantage of, but being appropriately supportive while also being supported when we deserve that. So for Gemini, I always give that example, but I digress. Taurus is in the 12th position, and Leo's in the 3rd, and Taurus is the 10th from the 3rd. So that means that this 12th house, the emotional volatility of Gemini, is an arena through which Leo can come to find its highest expression. It's because when we can be calm, emotionally nebulous, and sort of zen in a 12th house way, that helps to reduce the stimulating desires of this 3rd house Leo, which so hungrily seeks to get better, get higher numbers, to perform better, to tell everyone all the time the exciting things that are happening. If we have a Gemini rising without a good 12th house, they'll feel like they need to compensate. They'll need to tell everybody that because they don't have an intrinsic self-worth that is just pouring out of their chest. If you don't have that, then you're going to want to really push your validation in everyone's face, whether you're a man or you're a woman. And what is it that engenders this 12th house sense of calm? It's Venus. It's Taurus. And it is our experience of our self-worth in our childhood. That's why Taurus, our sexual relatability, our energy exchange capacity based on what we are as a biological being, Taurus, sexuality, earthy gender, or engenderment of attractiveness in some way. All of that and our experience of that is what gives the Leo in us the self-faith to make concise statements, but also not to be too egotistical, too pushy about it. It's a hard balance to find, but if you have an arena through which to work out how to find and enrich this balance, you should take fullest advantage of that. And how you find that balance as a Gemini is through Taurus, through the 12th house, through your sexual relatability, and your ability to attract abundance just based on what you are when you're not even trying. If you can be calm and not have to say anything in any moment, and if people come up to you and expect an instant visceral reaction from you, if you like to do that, then you can do it. But you shouldn't let the whole world bring these reactions out of you just because you're good at them. If you have an intrinsic sense of self-worth, then you can do that without losing energy, without wasting energy on the lack of abundance that comes from not just acting from what you already inherently intrinsically are as a valuable, useful entity. Your inner peace and contentment and your capacity to transmute feelings of turmoil provide a platform, the stage, the 10th house, from your appropriate and proud social expression, cultivating habits, etc. It's your inner peace and contentment that allows you to let the world's turmoils roll off you like water off of a duck's back. It allows you to let other people's pushiness and antagonism flow through you, to understand and not to take personally when people come to you for information. Don't take it personally, because you don't have to, because you already have fulfillment if you have a strong Uranus, if you've developed experiences that ground in your memory the sense that what you already are without trying is already useful, intrinsically valuable, and perfect. Now you need to have these experiences in order for you to feel at the deepest sense that you don't need to try hard to validate yourself to anybody. Now, and again, what brings this is the self-faith of Leos making concise statements and communication is built on the psychological foundations of Taurus. Taurus is a psychological sign. And this can be, it can be very useful for a Gemini to have a therapist and to relate through the therapist, especially right now. Sexuality, binary, non-binary, how you express your sexuality in a way that which you truly feel is attractive to others. Not because you can push information in anybody's face and you work really hard to do it. Not because you want to attach yourself to a group and seek desperately to have skills, to have cultivated habits and knowledge which is useful to this particular grouping or that. Because that is something that is deeply a part of you. Aries is in the 11th house for a Gemini, and there's a deep identity that comes through groups and humanitarian causes and more of like ideological groups. Like if you're into manga, then you'll know all the Leo in you will confidently want to have knowledge of and an expression of, a ready expression for anybody that relates to manga, anime, Japanese cartoons, or whatever, if that's your thing. Or if you're a musician, then the Leo in you will work hard to develop knowledge and cultivate skills that relate to that field of experience and expertise so that you can readily be relied on to use that knowledge in a way that's useful to everybody. But if you've developed into all of this for the sake of things and ideas that don't relate intrinsically to what you really deeply enjoy, you might have a whole world of knowledge in your head that kind of doesn't fulfill you. And if it's not fulfilling to you, then it's not attractive to others. It's not deeply intrinsically valuable and useful in a way that it could be and should be to others. It's an important thing for Gemini because Venus is connected to a lot of important parts in the chart. This 12th house as well as the 5th house. It's deeply useful to your 5th house if you have the time, since the 5th house is Libra for Gemini, right? So Venus rules the 5th house, Libra, as well as the 12th house, Taurus, which means that your ability to feel the self-worth, to contemplate, to find what it is, to take the time to find what it is that really deeply enriches you based on what you are as a man or a woman. The loveliness of what a woman can bring to a personal relationship, but also to your creative capacity in all of these groups. Libra is in the 5th, which means your relatability as your gender and with other people is your creative expression. It is your inspiration. The 5th and the 3rd are kind of tied because the 5th house relates to Leo, and the 3rd house is Leo for a Gemini. So this ability to take the time to invest in self-knowledge and contemplation on that which makes you attractive is going to enrich your creative abilities and make it better, make it discerned. So you're not just blabbering about any old thing. You're going to find something that relates deeply to what you found yourself to enjoy in your secluded, isolated moments of self-exploration of all your skills and all your things you're interested in. Now, when Uranus was in Aries, in your 11th house, from about 2011 till about like 2019-ish. This caused you a desire to build a reputation, gains, and an identifiable mark in the world. Something that you can relate with a group. Again, it's like whether it's musicians or music in general or a specific brand of music, or whether it's like, you're obsessed with Japanese manga or even just simple themes like, like violence or like you know, guns and these sorts of things. Aries in the 11th. Gemini can be into all these sorts of things. Hunting, you know, like whatever group, or, you know, the type of people who identify with hunting as being okay, as long as you tag the animal and you do it so that you reduce, help curb extinction, but also reducing overpopulation of animals that are making other animals extinct. A Gemini can tell you that, look, this is completely logical and rational, and if you don't understand that, I'm taking it up as my group to show the importance of the rational knowledge of this thing, which might be emotionally, empathically draining to some people, but don't be such a pussy. Look, can't you see rationally that this is important? It's the kind of thing that Gemini, these are the groupings that Gemini involves itself with, which you might have explored while Uranus was in Aries. Because again, Aries is your 11th house. It's groups, social groups, ideological, thematic resonances that various groups vibe and jive to. Aries, Uranus and Aries might have caused you to wonder and experience about all these things. And through that, you desired to build a reputation and gains, an identifiable mark in the world, in one of those spheres, in something that you would be proud to have other people proud of you. That you would feel, that's the 11th house. It's gains, glory, fame, and name. And true, it's like an egoic, it's the egoic end of what the 5th house is looking to do. The 11th house expresses in its results what the 5th house is looking to fix itself on. So, the desire to build a reputation, have gains in the world with some kind of grouping, the 11th house thing, the Aries pushing you to experience all these things that you intuitively feel might just be, Aries is this formless way of wanting to embody these things. And you might have come to find that you can't really express that well through any of these groupings if you don't have some kind of sexual and financial identity which holds intrinsic worth, which has resources, which attracts resources, because it's the resources that you attract that would make your 11th house have some tangible way of connecting through to it. Aries is the experience of a primordial volition, and Taurus is the grounding of an identity, which is the identity, the biological identity that you've been since you were about like 11, 12, 13, 14 and coming into puberty. Whatever this grouping that you identify through is, you are now in this period asking yourself, while Uranus is in Taurus, what is it about how I've lived that can give me the inner feeling like I can serve this idea. I can serve the world of hunting in a way that really fires me up. Or I can serve the world of, gosh, it could be anything. If you're a meditation person, then how can you serve the world of meditation? If that's your 11th house, that's a glory that you seek to express for whatever reason. Maybe your Mars is in like Pisces or something like that. And so Aries is seeking to express itself through this mystical sort of vibe or something along these lines. If you find whatever the ideal grouping that you're in, you might find that you can't relate with it except through resources. And your resources come from the 12th house inner peace. The 12th house feeling like you have intrinsic self-worth. This brings out dealings of inner calmness. Without without Taurus, it's like you could work for this grouping, but you would, if you do it in a way that doesn't relate to what fulfills you, then you'll just work for this group, and you'll find Gemini in proud ways of expressing useful knowledge as relates to this group, but you might not feel like the proceedings are fulfilling you in a way that gives you this inner contentment. You might feel cheated. You might feel like you worked for this thing but didn't work out a way of relating to it that was attractive. And this deeply relates to your, again, your sexual relatability with when you're young. You might even find that as a Gemini, you relate to puberty and to horny hormonal structures through groups that you identify with. You might have had friend groups and social groups which you leaned on first, and then you had to find a sexual identity within those people, within that group, based on your identity, based on your gender, based on your individuality, based on your family, your roots, what your mother shows you that you can love others through, what your father can give you as a productive sense of leadership. All of these things are probably going to be a way for you to expand on your relation to that grouping at that time, and even through the person that you were with. You might have found that they were an adjunct to this bigger grouping kind of deal. And the Leo, since the Leo in you, let me see if I've just digested all that I can here. Agitation shows a lack of integration. Your 12th house will be, you will be agitated, and you won't be able to peaceably let the world's reactions to you and your reactions to the world, you won't be able to discern them, to manage your mind and to manage your resources in a way that the Leo in the 3rd house would effectively do so. You won't be able to do these things if you haven't worked out your personal, social, sexual relatability as a leader and as a follower through your relationship with a partner or with several partners or whatever it is that is your sexual operation. If you don't have these experiences of your self-worth, then Leo can't flourish in self-faith. If the mind is troubled, the Leo, the sun in you. That's what I mean by that. If you have agitation in your sense of self-worth, then your sun as the 3rd lord, it can't flourish in self-faith if the mind is troubled by not experiencing intrinsic self-worth firsthand. If you haven't experienced your self-worth, then the Leo won't, whenever it makes a decision to make a witty comment, it might think, how is this going to come off to everybody? Because I don't have a familiar call and response in my role in my personal life. So when people come to me asking for information, how do I know that they're just not some annoying parasite? Or how do I know that they aren't like being a boss? And how do I know they don't have some kind of egotism? If they're being egoic with me and forcing me to use my brain and my information, then why should I give it to them? And why should anybody expect anything from me? This type of Gemini might think this, and they might take personally when people come to them for the information that they so confidently express. And this all might just simply have to do with the fact that you've never worked out how your solid identity as a person relates to people at a personal, intimate level. If you are a man and you relate sexually as a man, and you need to make that comment as the Gemini. Oh, wow, look at this person's clothes. Isn't that ridiculous? If you do that and you exercise it just for the sake of trying it out, and your partner says, yes, I like how you just did that. You just said that thing. You ruled with your instinct, and I love how you did that. Then you get to think, okay, so this is attractive, and this makes me feel good. This is giving me a sense that I'm helping others, and I'm developing a role which is attractive and which is abundant. So that the comments that I make, people are enjoying it. And I know that. I have firsthand experience of it. So I'll keep doing it because I'm getting rewards for being willing to experiment with my self-worth in this way. Deeply, ultimately transmutes into Leo, into the sun's ability to make witty statements and comments and things based on this leadership that everyone enjoys what I am, because I have intrinsic self-worth. Now, if it's the opposite, where you're the type of person who is a follower and who has witty, observant comments as relates to the people around, you might make that witty comment, but it might not be just as the masculine sort of like, hey, I'm doing this thing to make fun of this person. It's funny, hey, aren't I witty? It might be as a reliable purveyor of knowledge related to what your partner is seeking. Your partner might say, gosh, like I need to get a new car. And you might know a friend who's selling a car, who's got it on the cheap, and it's a perfect, good opportunity for your partner who needs a car. But if you feel like, oh, but I don't know, maybe my partner will feel like I'm pushing them with this information. Maybe my partner will feel like I'm being too pushy by suggesting that maybe my friend's car might be useful to them. You know what? I'm not even going to tell them, because it might go at the expense of the calmness that I try to project and that my partner expects from me as this non-binary, non-invasive, 12th housey sense of self-worth. And if that's how you relate, and if you don't want to relate as a receptive communicator partner to the leadership of your partner, then you're not going to end up saying that witty statement out of confidence, which is the Gemini's sun, which is the very thing that engages you to work out your own karma for your own destiny and capacity to transform blocked energy. It's good for anybody to work out this blocked energy on the part of Leo, but Leo needs Taurus and these puberty area senses of self-worth in order to express the fullest capacity of the sun as the third lord. And so that's why Uranus and Taurus is quite important for you as a Gemini. Although, Uranus and Taurus could just end up being a rather dumb note for you. It's your fifth lord, so it's probably important. Venus being your fifth lord. So this period could teach you a lot about how you can express your own highest creative capacity by the identity you like to feel useful to specific individuals in relationship. How you relate to specific individuals in relationship is the very avenue through which the sun expresses itself as the third lord for Gemini. Even Gemini itself is the third sign, and your every action, even your fourth, Gemini is the first lord, Virgo is the fourth house. So that means that your very action and your emotional foundation is kind of built on your ability to act and process skills, hobbies, cultivations, knowledge, awareness, hobbies, habits, all these things that are built on the identity which you build with other people in Taurus, in this 12th house, and your intrinsic self-worth. So I don't want to ramble too much about all these things, but we can see why it's important for you as a Gemini to relate to your Taurus 12th house and to relate to your sexual identity and to experiment with it and explore it, especially right now, because this could lead to further fulfillment down the line. There might be other things that might be more important to you in your life, but this period will bring these themes out, showing you how you can get the most out of what you are in your capacity to express the sun. These themes will be especially apparent, again, if you have Venus Atmakarika, or Venus, if you're going through Venus Mahadasha right now. Again, check out the first video of Uranus and Taurus to kind of get a sense of why this might be particular to anybody, and special to anybody. But this period is a useful time for you as a Gemini to get the most out of your relationships, to get the most out of yourself, and to really do some deep contemplating. Uranus and Taurus might put you in some moments where you need to contemplate and experience for yourself, look in the mirror and say, what am I? How is the familiar habits and groups that I've developed myself into, and even habits and cultivated habits, how are these denying and obstructing my intrinsic sense of self-worth and reducing my ability to have abundance? And how can I integrate my felt sense that I could be more abundant with what I've built on so far through Leo and the Sun? This is a period where you can work out that karma to get the most aggressiveness out of your appointed Leo, out of your appointed solar expressions in whatever field that your sun comes through, while also being more effectively receptive in relationships so you don't come off as too egotistical. Now's the time to learn especially how your personal sexual relationships can increase this. That's why I highly recommend that you look up Tantra, interpersonal relationship, even get a therapist. Anybody, if you feel tough things relating to this field, you can use these things as ways to build on your knowledge of how you can relate to your world. So that was a long one, folks. I hope you guys enjoyed that. I'm Dustin Cormier for How to Rock Astrology. Feel free to stay tuned for more stuff, because there's always more stuff coming out in the world of How to Rock Astrology. Let me know in the comments, subscribe, like, and all that stuff if you guys enjoyed it. I'll see you guys on the next one. Greetings, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Dustin Cormier, and welcome to How to Rock Astrology. Just hearing some fancy cars going outside my window. Nice to see you today. Today we're going to be talking about Uranus and Taurus as it relates to you as a Cancer rising. We've already been discussing quite a bit in this series, and so if you've been watching, we've been talking about how Uranus and the Sun and Saturn are in this evolutionary, this interesting sort of, there's a reflection of Saturn, Uranus, and the Sun in Hinduism as relates to Shiva, Vishnu, and Brahma. Can put them in different orders. The idea is that Brahma is the creator, the manifester. Vishnu is the omniscient preserver, and Shiva is the destroyer. So how we could kind of schematize this is that Shiva is kind of like
you could look at them in different ways. How I'm thinking about it is that maybe Brahma is like the sun. It's this creator that's constantly getting new ideas, new opportunities. Vishnu is like Saturn that holds you into a certain slot, a certain place. And Shiva is the destroyer, which uproots whatever place you're in, whatever Vishnu, whatever preservation you found, in order that more creation, more Brahma can go further. You can't really grow and grow greater without the disruption of what you're in at the present moment. So Saturn holds you to where you are in status and career, in work, and in your diligent, rigid sense of working. So does the sun, but the sun is more about how consistent can you be in building on your own soul's and spirit's capacity to become what you want to manifest for yourself, to contribute the best you can as yourself. Uranus stands in between these two as the breakup point, where Saturn gets to a certain point and the sun expresses through that, and then Uranus says eventually, you've been hanging on this for too long, you've gotten too familiar with it, you need to change it up so that your sun can wrench more information and squeeze its own essence towards greater purpose than the present state that Saturn has you, the present part of the pyramid, the present job that your boss has given you, where he's above you but you're below, he's above you but you're above your people who work underneath you. You're always some part of some schema in the hierarchical world of finances of today. And Uranus is going to keep you spinning in this company so that you let go of this job but open yourself to opportunities to another job or a better company within the same field. And hopefully if you've got a good Saturn, you're going to find fields or a company or a value that will bring you through to the heights of the opportunities that are available to you in the world. If you have a good Saturn, you're going to keep working towards something that will give you a good sense of that. The sun for you, a Cancer, it rules your second house. And we're going to talk about how the sun is what's building a root foundation for you to grow your empire while you merge with other groups, while you give your resources to other companies and things. Now we're going to talk about how Taurus relates to all this very soon as well. We're basically there. So for a Cancer rising, well, for anybody, we have to consider the metaphor that I've been using to describe Uranus and the Sun and Saturn. We've been using the musical chairs metaphor. How I think of before we break that down, first thing I want to show you guys is a picture of Cancer Lagna, Lagna meaning ascendant. This picture comes from Ryan Kurczak's astrology apprenticeship program. It's the Asheville Vedic Astrology apprenticeship program. So this chart is a southern chart, and it's meant to show us the signs that do get along with the ascendant and the signs which don't. We can see here that the Leo is neutral to Cancer. Then we see Virgo and Libra are kind of not the best friends with Cancer, and they're also not the best friends with the moon. But Scorpio and Sagittarius are auspicious. That's what this green A means. Now you'll notice that generally the signs that rule fire and water signs, the planets that rule fire and water, get along together. Cancer, being ruled by the moon, gets along with Mars, ruled by Scorpio and Aries, and it gets along with Jupiter, ruled by Sagittarius and Pisces, because Cancer is also a water planet, a water sign. And it gets along with Leo, too, although here we have neutral status for Leo, because technically the sun can give heavy, tough attributes to a Cancer rising. But technically, no one can really be the sun is not really an enemy to anyone. Although the sun can sometimes have necessary evils associated with it based on what house it rules. In this case, Leo, ruling the second house, has a materialistic quality which is not conducive to the sun's most noble intent. But this is the way Cancer is. Cancer is inspired to ground a material security, which is for the sake of spirit. And if the sun is well placed and it has support, then it will be part of the dharma of Cancer to do this. It's just that it's very personal. It has to do with developing your own family, your own self, and this is not conducive to the fiery, critical objectivity and detachment of a king, which the sun typically does. A king sees through inspiration for the whole country, for the whole nation, for its field, for its dedicated placement. And usually that dedicated, inspired goal is bigger than yourself. For Cancer in particular, that bigness is its own family. That's where Cancer is most compelled to express its dharmic inspiration, to manifest itself and to express its potentials. It's through its family, through family values. And family values are very intricately connected with community values. That's what we're going to be talking about here. We can see that for a Cancer rising, now we'll note that, so Leo is an okay place. It's a neutral zone for Cancer, but it's generally good, and it's important for Cancer. It takes on some heaviness, but, especially if the sun is well placed, that heaviness will be put to good use. Everyone has an ill-ish second house. The second house can be frustrating for everyone, but if your second lord is well placed, then the challenges related to the second house will still come through in a positive way. It all depends on the health of the house lord. Now, for a Cancer, we also notice that Taurus is the 11th lord, the 11th house. Libra and Taurus together rule the 4th house for Cancer and the 11th house for Cancer. This kind of goes to show how immediate connections and associations of the domestic reality of the Cancer are deeply involved with their values that they express on a communal level, the 11th house. The 4th house grounds the domestic sphere for Cancer, but that will always be involved with the values that Cancer attaches itself to in a community sense, of the things around it, its friends, its social values, which could include anything like, like if they're into motorcycles, or if they're into freedom of speech, or if they're into community barbecues where they can get together with friends and play music and share things that they love, and to kind of be a host for that sort of thing. Usually Cancer buys a home where they can be a host for these kind of big community things. Now, Uranus is coming into the picture here because Uranus is in Taurus now. And Taurus it's the 11th house. The 11th house is kind of egoistic. It's kind of a sense of what the gains. And what Cancer deeply desires for its gains, what it really wants to glorify itself by at the end of things, is to be loved and to be even attractive and to be respected by those in its very close sphere. That's the Taurus. Taurus holds the 11th house of gains and positive fame and name and prospects. Right? Can you dig that? Now, the more Cancer has a sense of their own familiar relationship with their immediate loved ones and surroundings, and the more they have a grip on how they can be abundant and trustworthy and loyal and reliable and to serve those close to them, if they can find positive relationship dynamics within those close to them and around them, with the shop owners and their friends and their brothers and sisters and siblings and family, wife or husband, children, uncles and aunts, and all these things related to family. If the Cancer person finds a positive way to relate with all these different things, then they will also find a strength and a familiarity when it comes to relating to these ideological groups. In fact, the people who come to their barbecues would love to see how the Cancer person deals with family, how they deal with sexuality. It's because Taurus is on the 11th house. So the familiar dynamics ground the extra social, intellectual group dynamics. And Cancer will ultimately get some very good gains and some important feelings of having lived their life effort with gusto. Their goals and their aspirations, they attracted it just purely out of what they are. If they want to feel that, then they've got to deal with Taurus, with their sexuality, whether you have sexuality or whether you don't, and what it means if you don't. And you've got to deal with that dynamic of your swank, of your funkiness, of your swagger, where you fix your rigid idea of how you can serve others in your immediate sphere. This will ground how you fix your way of serving the bigger groups that you want to be a part of. Because Taurus, familiar, fixed, is in the 11th house. Extra familiar, fixed, ideological groups. So I don't want to spin too much on that same thing. But all of this goes to show that how you understand your values, your personal values, which you have been accessing as it relates to yourself ever since puberty. You've been using the groups that you find yourself in and involve yourself in order to define your self-worth, your values, and how you can relate with people. You use your sense of relating with people with familiar things, with familiar music, with familiar ways of thinking about building a family or enjoying your time, going to a movie, having a car, enjoying romance. These things are what you use, whether you were like the guy who would buy the car to hang out with the chick, or whether you were a girl who would have beautiful things and come up to a man and show a man the ways in which you can be useful but also funny, and to open their heart but also do fun things with them and be functional with them. All of these things add up to your capacity to exchange energy at a basic level based on what you intrinsically are in your biological body and your biological gender and whatever you choose to express through. If you find success, this will help you to find success in the world of being respected in the long run. Because then you can serve the people in your family who you're close to, who expect to be served by the wisdom of your familiar way of relating with the world. They want to see that. People want to see how you get this bombast and this swagger and what you give in order to fasten them to you, and this is going to be your gains in the long run. And it can be almost egotistical. It's almost like people see the Cancer almost seems like someone who's really trying to provide for you, to secure you for their emotional sake, and they're doing it for their insecurity. You almost always feel that with a Cancer rising. It's like, do you really love me, or do you just want me to be someone who down the road is going to thank you for what you gave me? Or do you really love me? Then again, what is love really, Cancer does intimately, genuinely love people, but it always comes with this 11th house annoying possible contradiction, which means that you might think that the Cancer person doesn't actually love you. They're just relating with you in order that you can make them feel like they have value and they're validated. And that validation allows them, eventually, this validation of others gives you a platform upon which you can express your sun, which is your own second house. The second house, the sun of Cancer, your immediate, your personal grounded fiscal, financial reality, and even family reality that you perpetuate with your will, with your inspiration, your personal connection to family, and even the empire and the statement that you make to all of your family and friends close to you. This all depends on how you, your ability to do this inspiration of the sun depends on the values and the abundance and the sense of self and confidence that you build from puberty based on your ability to relate to people close to you through some aspect of what you are, to make yourself abundant to attract those who would relate with you. So this is what these are saying here. We're going to talk about now about how Taurus is in the 10th house from Leo. This is true of everything. If you count from Taurus, if you count from Leo, Leo being the first house, 1st, 2nd, 3rd, 4th, 5th, 6th, 7th, 8th, 9th, 10th. Taurus is in the 10th house from Leo. And anything from the 10th house of anything is the upon which the worldly activity happens, so that you can work out the karma of that thing, of that house. And this is the same thing from every house. You could say the 10th house of the 7th house, for you that's Capricorn. What's the 10th house from there? It's the 4th house. So the 4th house provides the stage. Your intimate, emotional, domestic dealings provides the stage for you to work out the karma for what you would do on bigger social spheres. Okay? Let's think about that in the same way as how we're relating this scenario, where the 10th house from your second house. What is it? In other words, how does your desire for how does your ambition to establish a solid financial foundation and an empire of your self-worth, the second house, how does this use Taurus? How does it build from Taurus? This is what we're trying to explain in this video, and we're going to see how Uranus being in Taurus relates to this. So you have a desire for recognition and renown in the world. It's your 11th house. This is the 10th house, which provides a stage. This provides worldly activity for you to work out the karma of your second house, which is Leo, which is the sun. So your desire for renown and recognition in the world is what is the platform upon which you work out your personal empire, your personal way of fiscally relating with everything close to you and around you. So hopefully I'm making sense with this. I'm going to try to ground this all right now. Taurus and sexual relatability engenders name, fame, money, and resources in Cancer's dealings. Taurus and sexual relatability and ability to be abundantly attractive with what you inherently are to others. Your capacity to do this engenders name, fame, money, and resources and gains. Because Taurus is in the 11th house. And this eventually provides a platform, a foundational sense of self-worth. And it's the self-worth that you gain through how you gain in groups. How you relate sexually gives you a platform in groups, and you can see yourself in groups, and it's through standing on top of these groups that you and relating with them all that you find a capacity to express your sun in wherever your sun is. What we're saying here is that Taurus is in the 10th from the 2nd house for Cancer rising. And therefore Uranus relates, of course, Uranus relates deeply to your sun, because Uranus here is going to teach you through your familiar connection to your own sexuality, through whether you identify as a man and can lead confidently, through even with a consciousness of your groups, so that you can lead everybody to think that this is what we enjoy, isn't it? The Cancer looks around and is saying, is this what we believe in? And we'll ask about it. Cancer can be fixed and traditional about their ideas of how sexuality ought to be, about how people ought to relate. But if you are fluid and if you have a strong Mercury here, this will help you move your mental understanding of these familiar things around, of the familiar way that you relate. Ultimately, if you have a good Venus, then you will relate well to others, because you will understand how to satisfy your personal sexual needs, and you will contemplate them, and you will allow them to grow into the kind of swagger that would allow you to have clout in the social sphere of dealing with a group and even a big business organization. You know, like, you can be very useful to your boss if you have a good sense of how humans generally work. You can have a good sense of telling your boss that, look, believe me, I've got a family at home who enjoys these domestic things and these domestic things, and I know that this is a worthy investment for us to go into. Boss, here's my feeling. And of course, that's the feeling that draws out the research. It's the experience of Taurus, the familiar, that draws out the research for Cancer through the Taurus in the 11th house, to research what it is that is the foundation for family values for everybody. Cancer relates Taurus to its sense of how everybody ought to relate to each other. And this is how Cancer can contribute to groups. And this Cancer can even make an empire out of this based on their inspiration of the sun to express through the 2nd house of Leo. So, the capacity of Cancer to understand their intrinsic sexual role as a server in some ways and a provider in other ways. It's the two dimensions of Taurus. You're either serving and giving, or you're providing. A server and provider, they, in a way, I'm trying to tweak the language here so that a provider is one who brings wealth and abundance and value from within themselves and has it, and doesn't necessarily serve. It's what you are is providing to people just by that abundance. So this is more of like a taker, even though it's the provider. Cancer can be somebody who effectively takes from the world in order to provide. And that's how Cancer gets to be what it is it's very active in the world. And it's active in the world based on some feeling that they are a useful, active personality. And this, by being what they are, whether they've figured that out or not, they can provide just by being what they are, if they have a good Venus and a good, strong sense of this Taurus in the 11th house. This provides gains. Now, sexuality, Cancer loves to be this provider, but also to be like a server at the same time. Everybody is a bit of both, whether you're a man or you're a woman. The point of Uranus in Taurus right now is forcing you to move around and digest and think differently about the ways through which you relate to your familiars, to the people close to you, and to make you think whether they are bringing out a sense of enjoyment for you, which is worth it. Because if they aren't, if you have not connected to yourself a confident sexual persona with those close to you, with your wife, even with your brother, if you're a man and you have a brother and you want to express yourself confidently with your brother, the only way, like Gemini is more about the sibling thing, but the only way to get that confidence, to be able to competently deal with your competitors, you need to have a sense of sexual psyche strength within yourself, which attracts abundance and doesn't need to work hard to validate and impress itself to others. And the way you do that is generally to kind of like pick a lane, whether you're male or female. And to, now, if you're a man, you can be an effeminate person. And as a Cancer, you might very well be. But you might not express that. You can be a sensitive person and empathic and really deeply listen to your partner. But ultimately, you need to be able to be rigid and strong and to fix yourself pointedly to something that is going to provide value. And you need to be upfront and forceful about that. Even if you're an effeminate person, you still need to have leadership. If you really care about, if you really want to protect those close to you, you need to be a solid pillar in yourself of useful, functional energy creation and abundance, and to have something that you can do that provides not just resources and values. Those are like the external trimmings of what Taurus means. What Taurus really means is, do you have that thing which provides these abundances? And what that thing is which provides abundance is the lived experience of attractiveness, of the swagger, of pomp and circumstance, which is an intrinsic experience of yours. So that when you go to a boss or go to any job, deeply at some level, like you could read the book on how to impress an employer, and you might read all of the little things that you can do in order to at least impress them for the job interview, right? So you go in and you've got this suit, you've learned that you got to buy a suit and that you have to say these certain words, and don't ever say these words like don't ever say I don't know. Don't ever say I would be incapable of doing that. Find a way that you can lie about it. Say, I've never delved exactly in this field, but I'm sure that if the boss told me to, I could find experience related to this. Find some way to bullshit it so that you can get through to the employer and get to the other side. Now, as time goes on, if you just got in the door just by zeroing in on how to put up a good false artifice, you might be in the door, but the boss is still going to be checking whether you really deeply relate at a deep level. If you have the confidence to be the kind of ambassador for our company that could take criticism, that could act autonomously without depending on anyone else's leadership, you need to have that leadership in yourself. What is it that brings that sense of leadership? There's lots of different things. Having a good Saturn would be a part of it, which for you would be the ability to relate with groups, no matter what those groups are. And Saturn is a good way for you to deal with that. But more importantly, even if you don't have a good Saturn, what really gives anybody the feeling of confidence and abundance and attraction in any sphere is, again, it's Taurus. It's the familiar experience of one's inherent self-worth and value and attractiveness, which draws people to the personality of Cancer. And it's that personality which draws groups as well. And Cancers usually decide what is attractive to themselves. They decide it by like what they ought to be in order to attract people. They decide it by beloved groups, 11th house area. It's almost an egotistical sense of what would bring them. It's like what they respect at an ideological level. It's a value, it's a social humanitarian cause that is the universal, timeless, conservative cause of what's best for humanity and humanity's nature. This Taurus is very much the nature of nature. It's in the 11th house here. So Cancer can have a conservative, traditionalist view of what's best for all humans through their experiences in the world. And it's this thing, this rigid sense of rightness that they jive on and they move around groups with, and they have this, their unconscious expresses the symbol of what other peoples are looking to see. Now, this doesn't mean that they're right. This doesn't mean that that traditional view is always a good thing, but they will have a sense of it. And it's up to the Venus of Cancer to define whether they can build a sense of this like timeless value structure that they love while still in the moment dealing with the immediate person that they're dealing with based on their, with a respect for their views, with a respect to their beliefs. It's up to the 9th house and Venus and Jupiter to show whether you as a Cancer philosophically can at least relate to others. But in any case, no matter what culture or whatever you believe in, it's very important for you to see through the culture the archetype that you want to express, the sexual identity that you want to express, in order that you can fasten to it and use it in a familiar way, which groups, all the groups who know you are going to understand that that is your functional use in this group. And they will get a lot of use out of you if you can ground that. And you will be able to ground your sense of value in groups, in as an ambassador for a company or anything. It'll be much easier for you to maneuver your value to these groups if you can maneuver your value in an immediate sexual, intimate situation. So I hope that makes sense. Now, you might have found while Uranus was in Aries, in your 10th house, you might have found that Uranus was forcing experiences where you would be working in the world. Maybe the whole time from about 2011 to 2019, you might have been facing experiences where you were pushed. Uranus was in one of your angular houses at that point, so it must have been a very active period where you were dipping your hand and dipping your toe into all sorts of different possible groups which would find worldly activity for you. You might have even gotten an idea of who you are, of what activity you can contribute no matter what group you're in. It just might have pushed you into a sense of working, of responsibility and working in the world, finding what you can do to contribute to the greater picture of the world. And you might have found that you are wasting energy by working on something that doesn't relate deeply to your familiar sense of values from your family. Maybe you've been given an opportunity to go and work in, like, you're an American and you've gotten a temporary opportunity to go and work in, like, Bangladesh. And, so Uranus and Aries was there the whole time. And you finally, it's Uranus and Taurus. You decided, you know what, I'm going to do this. Despite I feel odd that I'm going against, I'm going to go away from my family. I'm going to go away from what's familiar. So you'll have been working the whole time. Now there's an opportunity for you to go and visit like Bangladesh or like some kind of place in India, far away from the United States. You go out there, now that it's Uranus and Taurus, you go and you come to find that the way they do things there enrich your sense of your own relating with your familiars. It would probably be very good for you. Cancer can actually be quite the globetrotter. They find what is their intrinsic sense of how to relate with their family by going and seeing how other cultures do it. That is a common thing for cancers to do. But you might find while you're out here that while you are experimenting with how you understand the traditional family relationship to be in this new culture, you might find that you are not developing on the familiar ideology group that you really want. Right now, you're probably in a period where you're learning what that is. And that's probably essentially what Uranus and Taurus is going to be teaching you. Is what is, now that you've found opportunities, you've found a way where you can contribute to the world through Uranus and Aries. Now Uranus and Taurus is asking you, what values are intrinsic to your family, your ancestry, because it's Taurus and it relates to the family that you've had while you were growing up. The situation that you evolved in during puberty. Hopefully if you had a good early childhood and if you don't have too much problems in your second house or in Taurus or with your Venus, then you will have had the time to manage and digest, hopefully have some kind of therapist or your mother or probably your mother, but somebody who would help you digest and organize your sense of the intrinsic values that your family have always had and how this relates to you. And throughout all these proceedings, Uranus and Taurus is going to be bringing up these questions for you. It might even affect your fourth house because Venus also rules your fourth house. And this would add up to a question of how you can best take the activity through of Uranus and Aries while you are being pushed into a place where you can contribute somehow to the world. How can you relate this to your basic identity and values and self-worth and sexuality even, and the way that you relate to familiars, which is now going to express as the way you relate to others. These things in Taurus that you're working out now, and you might be finding that, there are things from this culture that are useful to me and there are things in this culture that aren't. And how can I sublimate them into the ideal familiar sense of values that relate to my family, but even that my family could use? The new world changing of, like the internet. Right now, the internet is a huge thing in family values, and the coronavirus has caused a big change for how people understand education and family values and what all these things mean to community and etc. And you as a Cancer are going to be able to still bring down that which is related to our nature, our bodies, and you're going to be able to be a speaker to many groups for the importance of these things, and you might even be able to bring it into your job right now. It's a particular funny opportunity. But this is more about you crafting a familiar identity, which is going to make you work less, ultimately. You might find that while you were working through Uranus and Aries, you were working in ways that weren't contributing to the natural inherent abundant structure of the family life that you've lived since you were young. Now you have the opportunity to explore how you can take whatever activities you're involving yourself in and see whether they relate to what your values are. And if they don't, you might have to let go of some things. You might have to let go of the relationship that you've enveloped throughout all this time. Because maybe you've been finding that you've just been working on autopilot, trying to develop this or that job that doesn't relate to your sense of your intrinsic abundance and your internal nature. If it's important to you, this is an opportunity for you to let go of those things which do not attract abundance for you, which don't feel abundant, which feel lacking in passionate abundance and attraction to your way of relating to others in the world. Now is your opportunity to find what is your best way to deal in the world. And this is going to provide a platform for your sun and your ability to ground a financial a family and a group of people close to you in the second house of Leo, wherever your sun is. This Uranus and Taurus period, through all this wandering, is going to give you a platform through which you can work out how you can best find a family close to you that will give you you will allow to be abundant for in the long run. That you'll be able to push and be inspired to create based on nature, based on the nature that you are. So you're not just wasting time acting in the world for some other company that doesn't fulfill you and satisfy you and ultimately give you an abundant coffer back home where your intimate familiars are. Whew, so that was a lot. Hopefully that wasn't too much of the same, but I'm working on bettering my skills in this world of astrology and describing these sorts of things. I would love to know what you guys think. Send me a message or whatever. I'm Dustin Cormier for How to Rock a Campfire. For How to Rock Astrology, that is. How to Rock a Campfire is my old channel. I still say it. Like, subscribe, comment, do all the things. Let me know what you've thought about this, folks. I'd love to know. And thank you for watching.